I grew up in a fairly normal house. Nothing about it stood out. 2 stories, white siding, narrow driveway, small backyard. It was the kind of place you'd forget about 5 minutes after driving past it. Even the neighborhood was boring. Mostly older couples and families that had lived there since the 90s. The basement, though, was something everyone avoided. It wasn't finished like a lot of basements are now. No carpet, no drywall, just concrete floors, exposed beams, and that constant damp smell that never fully goes away no matter how many dehumidifiers you run. It was where we kept old furniture, holiday decorations, and boxes that hadn't been opened in years. When I was younger, I hated going down there. I couldn't explain why. It wasn't because I thought there were monsters or ghosts. It was more like a feeling, like you weren't supposed to be down there for long. As I got older, I brushed that feeling off. By the time I was 17, the basement had basically become my responsibility. My dad traveled a lot for work, and my mom worked late shifts, so if something needed to be grabbed from storage or the circuit breaker flipped, it was always me. The breaker box was located at the far end of the basement, past the washing machine and the old metal shelving units. To get to it, you had to walk by a door. That door is what this story is about. It sat at the bottom of the stairs, slightly to the left. It was made of thick wood and painted the same dull beige as the basement walls. No window, no label, just a door with a metal knob that always felt colder than it should have. I asked my parents about it once when I was around 10. My dad barely looked up from what he was doing and said it led to a crawl space. My mom said the same thing later, but her answer was quicker, like she didn't want to talk about it. That was enough for me at the time. As far as I knew, that door stayed closed. Always. I never saw it open. I never heard anyone go in or out of it, and I never tried the knob myself. Until the night the power went out. It was late, around 11:30 p.m. My mom was already asleep upstairs. My dad was out of town. I was in my room playing a game when everything went dark. At first, I figured it was just a temporary outage. But after 10 minutes passed and nothing came back on, I grabbed my phone flashlight and headed downstairs. The breaker tripped sometimes during storms, and there had been heavy rain earlier that evening. I wasn't worried, just annoyed. The basement stairs creaked like they always did. Halfway down, I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. That old, irrational discomfort I hadn't felt in years. I ignored it. The basement was darker than usual, even with my phone light. The shadows felt thicker, heavier, like the light wasn't fully cutting through them. I walked past the washer and dryer and toward the breaker box. That's when I noticed something off. The door was open. Not wide open, just a crack. Maybe 2 inches. I stopped walking. My first thought was that my parents had gone in there earlier and forgotten to close it. But that didn't make sense. My dad wasn't home, and my mom never went into the basement unless she absolutely had to, and she definitely wouldn't go into a crawl space. I stood there longer than I want to admit, staring at that thin black gap. Then I heard something. It was faint. So faint that for a second, I thought it was just the house settling. A slow, deliberate sound. Breathing. Coming from the other side of the door. I told myself it had to be my imagination. Or air moving through the basement vents. Or water pipes. Still, I didn't move closer. Hello. I called out, my voice sounding smaller than I expected. The breathing stopped. The silence afterward was worse. I backed away and hurried to the breaker box, flipping the switches as fast as I could. The lights snapped back on, flooding the basement with that harsh, buzzing brightness. I looked back at the door. It was still open. I didn't go near it. I went straight back upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and stayed awake until morning with my lights on. The next day, I asked my mom about the door. She froze when I mentioned it. Was it open? She asked. I nodded. She told me my dad must have forgotten to close it last time he checked the pipes. That explanation didn't sit right with me, but I didn't push it. That night, the door was closed again. For weeks, nothing happened. I started to think I'd imagined the whole thing. Then small things started changing. Boxes in the basement were moved. Not much, just shifted slightly like someone had bumped into them. Tools went missing and showed up days later in places they didn't belong. Once, I found muddy footprints near the bottom of the stairs. My mom blamed me. I didn't argue. A month later, I was home alone again when I heard it. A soft thump, then another, coming from beneath the floor. It sounded like someone walking slowly, carefully, directly under the living room. I turned the TV volume down and listened. The steps moved toward the basement stairs. I stood up, heart pounding, and quietly locked the basement door at the top of the stairs. The footsteps stopped. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I told my parents everything. The door, the breathing, the footsteps. My dad didn't say anything at first. He just stared at the floor, rubbing his jaw. Then he told me the truth. The door didn't lead to a crawl space. It led to a sub-basement, something that wasn't on the house plans. The previous owner had built it decades ago. According to my dad, it was meant for storage, but when my parents bought the house, they were advised to keep it locked and avoid using it. I asked why. My dad hesitated. There were problems, he said. That's all he would tell me. That night, he went down to the basement himself. I heard him open the door. Then I heard shouting. Then silence. A few minutes later, he came back upstairs pale and shaken. The next day, my parents hired contractors. They sealed the door permanently. Drywall. Cement. No trace left behind. We moved 6 months later. Years passed. I forgot about the house, mostly, until last year. I was scrolling through local news when I saw a familiar address. The house had been sold again. The new owners called police after discovering an illegal living space beneath the basement. Inside, they found evidence that someone had been living there for years. Food wrappers, blankets, clothes, and a mattress positioned directly beneath the living room. No one was ever found. But the part that still makes my stomach turn is this. The police report mentioned fresh footprints leading up to where the basement stairs used to be, even though the door had been sealed years ago. I was 19 when my parents divorced, and for a while my mom and I lived in a rental house we couldn't really afford but didn't have much choice about. It was one of those short-term solutions that ends up lasting longer than anyone expects. The house was old. Not charming old, just worn down. Yellowed walls, uneven floors, and that constant smell of dust and age that never fully left, no matter how much you cleaned. The landlord assured us it had good bones. My mom nodded politely, already exhausted, already resigned. The basement was unfinished and off-limits according to the lease. That should have been my first red flag. There was a door in the kitchen that led down to it. Solid wood. Deadbolt lock. No reason given other than storage for the owner. I didn't think much of it at first. We were barely settled in, boxes still stacked against the walls. The basement was out of sight and out of mind. For the first month, nothing strange happened. Then I started hearing noises. At first, they were subtle. So subtle I questioned whether they were even real. Soft taps. Distant thuds. The kind of sounds you assume come from pipes or the house settling. But these didn't feel random. They had rhythm. I noticed it one night while I was sitting alone in the living room. My mom was working a late shift, and I had the TV on low volume. Tap. Pause. Tap. Tap. The sound came from beneath the floor. I muted the TV and leaned forward, listening. Tap. Pause. Tap. It stopped when I stood up. I chalked it up to coincidence. The next night, it happened again. Same rhythm. Same timing. Always when the house was quiet. After a week of this, I mentioned it to my mom. She sighed and told me old houses make noise. Then she asked me not to scare myself. I tried not to, but the sounds didn't stop. They moved. Sometimes they came from beneath the kitchen, sometimes from under the hallway, once directly below my bedroom. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint scraping sounds beneath me. It sounded like something being dragged slowly across concrete. I didn't sleep. The first truly unsettling moment happened about 2 months after we moved in. I was in the kitchen making ramen when I heard a voice. Not loud, not clear, just a voice. It came from below the kitchen floor. At first, I thought it was the TV upstairs bleeding through the vents. But the words didn't match anything I was watching. It sounded like someone trying to speak quietly. I stood frozen, cup of noodles in my hand, heart hammering. "Hello," I said, barely above a whisper. The voice stopped. I waited. Then, from beneath my feet, I heard it again. "Hello." Same word, same tone, but wrong. It sounded like my voice. I dropped the cup. Boiling water splashed onto my hand, but I barely felt it. I backed away from the kitchen door, staring at it like it might open on its own. That night, I didn't tell my mom. I told myself I'd imagined it. The next few weeks were a blur of anxiety and sleep deprivation. The sounds became more frequent. Scratching, footsteps, whispering, always when I was alone, never when my mom was home. Once I worked up the courage to talk back again. "Who's there?" I asked, standing at the top of the basement door. There was a long pause. Then, from below, came a soft reply. "You are." My stomach dropped. The voice wasn't exactly mine, but it was close enough to feel wrong. I ran upstairs and locked myself in my room. The next day, I called the landlord. He laughed when I mentioned noises and told me the basement was sealed and empty. He said no one had been down there in years. I asked why it was locked. "Insurance reasons," he said quickly. That answer didn't help. A few nights later, I woke up to the sound of breathing. Not beneath me. In the room. It was slow, controlled, careful. I lay perfectly still, staring into the darkness. The breathing came from the corner near my closet. I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. Nothing was there. The breathing stopped instantly. The basement noises stopped after that. For a few days, the house felt quiet again. Too quiet. Then I noticed the door. The basement door was unlocked. I knew for a fact it had been locked. I checked it obsessively after the voice incident. But now, the deadbolt hung open. The door itself was still closed. I called my mom at work and begged her to come home early. When she arrived, she brushed it off as a mistake. Said maybe she'd unlocked it earlier and forgotten. I watched her closely as she said it. She wouldn't look at the door. That night, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, heavy, one step at a time. I sat up in bed, listening. The steps stopped halfway up. Then came the whisper. "Come down." It was my voice again. I screamed. My mom rushed into my room, flipping on the lights. The footsteps were gone. The next day, we packed essentials and stayed with my aunt. When my mom went back alone to grab more things, she found something that made her finally believe me. The basement door was open. Wide open. Inside, the basement wasn't empty. There were blankets laid out on the floor, empty food containers, a portable radio, and marks on the walls. Tallies. Dozens of them. Some scratched deep into the concrete. Others written in black marker. All grouped in clusters, like someone was counting days. The police were called. They searched the basement thoroughly. They found no one, but they did find a crawl tunnel leading beyond the foundation of the house. It connected to the storm drains. The landlord claimed he knew nothing about it. We moved out that week. A month later, I got curious and searched the address online. I found an old missing persons report. A teenage boy disappeared from that same house over 10 years earlier. Last seen arguing with someone in the kitchen. According to the report, neighbors claimed they heard his voice coming from the basement days after he vanished, calling for help. No body was ever found. I don't live with my mom anymore. I have my own place now. Sometimes late at night, when everything is quiet, I hear tapping beneath the floor. Same rhythm. Tap, pause, tap, tap. And every once in a while, when I'm not careful, I swear I hear my own voice whispering my name from somewhere below me. I grew up in a house where one rule was never explained but strictly enforced. Never open the basement door. It didn't matter how old we were or who was home. If we even touched the handle, we were punished. No warnings. No second chances. My parents weren't abusive people. Strict sometimes, sure, but reasonable. Except when it came to that door. The basement door was located at the end of a short hallway near the kitchen. It was different from the other doors in the house. Thicker, heavier, with 2 locks instead of 1. A deadbolt and a sliding chain. It was always locked. When I was little, I asked why. My mother told me it wasn't safe. My father said it was none of my business. After that, I stopped asking. As kids, my sister and I turned it into a game. We dared each other to see who could stand closest to the door without touching it. Whoever chickened out first lost. Sometimes we'd press our ears against it, listening. We never heard anything. That almost made it worse. The house itself was normal. Suburban. Quiet street. Friendly neighbors. Nothing about it suggested anything was wrong. Except the door. As I got older, I started noticing things that didn't add up. Groceries disappeared faster than they should have. My mom did laundry constantly, even when the hampers weren't full. And every night, without fail, my parents locked their bedroom door. I realized that wasn't normal when friends started staying over. They'd comment on how strict my parents were, how weird it was that the basement was off limits. I laughed it off. Then the noises started. I was 13 the first time I heard something come from the basement. It was late at night. Everyone else was asleep. I was lying in bed when I heard a low thump. Then another. It sounded like something heavy shifting. I froze. The sound came again, closer this time. A dragging noise. Slow. Deliberate. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I asked my parents about it. My dad slammed his coffee mug down hard enough to crack it. "You didn't hear anything," he said. My mom wouldn't meet my eyes. After that, the noises became more frequent. Never loud. Never obvious. Just enough to make you doubt yourself. Footsteps. Scraping. Occasionally, a soft knocking sound. Always from below. My sister heard them too. She told me one night, whispering under the covers, that she thought someone lived down there. I told her she was being stupid, but the thought stuck. When I was 15, I broke the rule. My parents were out for the evening. My sister was at a friend's house. I was alone. The house felt wrong that night. Too quiet. Heavy. I stood in front of the basement door for a long time, staring at it. Then I unlocked it. The door opened only a few inches before something stopped it. Not a lock. Pressure. Like something on the other side. I froze. "Hello," I said. There was a long pause. Then I heard breathing. Slow. Wet. Close. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the deadbolt back in place. I didn't tell anyone. But after that night, things changed. The noises got louder. More impatient. The knocking turned into pounding. Once I heard screaming. Muffled. Desperate. I ran to my parents' room, shaking, telling them someone was in the basement. My father grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. "You will not talk about this," he said through clenched teeth. My mother cried. That was the night I stopped feeling safe in my own house. A week later, my sister disappeared. She didn't come home from school. The police were called. Friends questioned. Teachers interviewed. My parents acted devastated. They put her picture on milk cartons. Hung flyers around town. They cried on camera. I watched them perform grief perfectly. But I knew. That night, I heard screaming from the basement again. This time, I recognized the voice. It was my sister. I ran to the door, pounding on it, screaming her name. The screaming stopped instantly. My father dragged me away. "You don't understand," he said. "They made us do this." That was the first time he ever acknowledged there was a they. The next few months were hell. I stopped sleeping. Stopped eating. The house smelled different. Metallic. Rotten. I started noticing stains near the basement door. Dark ones that never fully cleaned away. I tried telling the police. They didn't believe me. My parents were respected members of the community. No evidence. No cause. Just a traumatized kid. One night, I woke up to the sound of the basement door opening. Slowly. Deliberately. I crept into the hallway and watched from the shadows. My father stood at the door. Someone stood on the other side. I only saw part of them. Thin, bare feet, bruised ankles. They whispered something to my father. He nodded. Then he closed the door again. I ran back to my room and vomited. I planned my escape after that. I waited. Gathered evidence. Snuck recordings. Took pictures. When I turned 18, I left. I went straight to the police with everything I had. They reopened the investigation. They searched the house. They broke open the basement door. What they found made the news. A reinforced room. Chains bolted into concrete. Multiple mattresses. Blood stains. And shallow graves beneath the floor. 6 bodies, including my sister. My parents were arrested. During the trial, more details came out. The basement wasn't a basement. It was a holding space. My parents had been paid to keep people there. Runaways. Immigrants. People no one would miss. Some were moved. Some were killed. The screaming I heard? Those were people realizing they weren't leaving. My parents never looked at me during the trial. They pleaded guilty. I changed my name after that. Moved far away. Started over. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear knocking. Slow. Patient. Coming from beneath the floor. And I wonder how many houses like mine still exist. With doors you're told never to open. I moved into the house alone. That was the whole point. After a bad breakup and a string of shared apartments that never felt like mine, I wanted somewhere quiet. Somewhere cheap. Somewhere I could disappear into for a while. The listing mentioned a finished basement, recently renovated. That mattered to me because I worked nights and slept during the day. I like being underground. Less noise, less light. When I toured the house, everything looked fine. The landlord was friendly in that distant, rehearsed way people get when they've shown the same place too many times. He pointed out new drywall, fresh paint, and a lockable basement door for privacy. I asked why it needed a lock. Separate space, he said. People like to feel secure. That answer didn't bother me at the time. I moved in 2 weeks later. The first few nights were uneventful. Quiet. Exactly what I wanted. The basement bedroom stayed cool even during the summer heat. The walls were thick, the ceiling low. It felt insulated from the rest of the world. On the fourth night, I heard something that didn't belong. Breathing. Not my own. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I noticed the sound. Slow. Controlled. Close. I held my breath. The breathing stopped. I sat up and turned on the lamp. Nothing. The room was empty. I checked the door. Locked. I told myself it had been my imagination and went back to sleep. The next night, it happened again. Same breathing. Same rhythm. This time, I followed the sound. It led to the far corner of the basement, where the storage room was. The storage room had been sealed off with a metal door and padlock. The landlord had told me it was for maintenance access only. I stood there listening. The breathing came from behind the door. "Hello?" I asked. Silence. I stepped closer. "Is someone there?" There was a pause. Then, from the other side of the door, I heard a faint reply. "Please." My stomach dropped. I backed away, heart racing, and ran upstairs. I called the landlord immediately. He didn't sound surprised. He sighed and told me the house made noise sometimes. Pipes. Vents. Old construction. I told him I heard a voice. He paused longer this time. Then he said, "Don't go near that door again." That was it. No explanation. No concern. That night, I slept upstairs with all the lights on. The next day, I searched the house thoroughly. No signs of forced entry. No hidden doors. No crawl spaces that I could access. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The breathing continued every night after that. Always from the storage room. Sometimes accompanied by scratching. Sometimes whispering. The voice never spoke full sentences. Just fragments. "Help. Please. Don't." I called the police. They came, searched the house, checked the basement. The storage room door was still locked. They told me there was nothing they could do without evidence. That night, the breathing stopped. For the first time since I moved in, the basement was silent. Too silent. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of the lock clicking. I sat up in bed, frozen. The storage room door creaked open. Something stepped out. I couldn't see it clearly in the dark, but I heard it move. Bare feet on concrete. Slow. Careful. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The light caught a man standing just outside the storage room. He was thin. Too thin. His skin stretched tight over his bones. His eyes were wide and unfocused, like he hadn't seen light in a long time. He raised his hand slowly. "Don't scream," he said. I screamed anyway. He flinched and backed away, hands shaking. "I won't hurt you," he said quickly. "I swear. I just need help." I bolted upstairs and locked myself in the bathroom, calling 911 with shaking hands. While I waited, I heard him moving around the basement, opening drawers, touching things, crying softly. The police arrived within minutes. They found him sitting on the basement floor, hugging his knees. He didn't resist. They asked him how he got there. He told them he'd been living in the storage room for over a year. The landlord had put him there, promised cheap rent, a place to stay, then locked him in, fed him occasionally, threatened him if he made noise. The police arrested the landlord that night. I thought it was over. I was wrong. The investigation uncovered more. The storage room wasn't new. It had been used before. Other tenants, other people, some of them never left. The house was condemned. I moved out immediately. Months passed. I tried to forget. Then one night in my new apartment, I woke up to breathing. Slow, controlled, close. I sat up, heart racing. The room was empty, but beneath the floor, faintly, I heard scratching and a voice. "Please." I didn't grow up poor, but we were always one problem away from being in trouble. So when my uncle offered my mom a house for cheap rent after my dad died, she didn't ask questions. Neither did I. We just packed what we could and moved. The house was old but solid. 2 floors, narrow windows, a wide front porch that creaked when you stepped on it. The basement entrance was outside, around the back of the house. That was unusual, but I didn't think much of it at first. My uncle gave my mom one instruction the day we moved in. "Don't use the basement," he said casually, like he was reminding her to take the trash out on Tuesdays. "There's nothing down there you need." My mom nodded. That should have been enough. But it wasn't. I was 16 at the time, old enough to notice when adults were lying badly. And something about the way my uncle avoided eye contact when he said it stuck with me. For the first few weeks, everything felt normal. School, work, dinner, sleep. Then I started noticing the neighbors. They stared. Not openly. Not in a way you could confront. Just lingering looks. Whenever I came home alone, I'd feel eyes on me from across the street. Curtains would shift. Porch lights would flick on, then off. Once, an older woman next door stopped me as I was taking the trash out. "You're the new one," she said. I nodded. She glanced toward the back of the house. "Don't go down there," she added quietly. Then she walked away. I told myself she was just nosy. The first sound came late one night, around 1 a.m. I was lying in bed when I heard a deep thud. Not inside the house. Outside. Behind it. Then another. Heavy. Like something striking wood. I got up and looked out my bedroom window toward the backyard. The yard was dark, but I could just make out the outline of the basement door at the back of the house. It was shaking. Not violently. Not like someone trying to break out. Just gently. Like someone testing it. I stood there watching until it stopped. The next morning, I asked my mom about the basement. She got quiet. "You told us not to use it," she said. "That's not an answer." She looked tired suddenly. Older. "Some places," she said, "are better left alone." That was the end of the conversation. The sounds didn't stop. They happened every few nights. Sometimes pounding. Sometimes scraping. Sometimes nothing more than movement. Always after midnight. Always from the basement. I started paying attention to patterns. The sounds were louder on certain nights. Specifically, nights when my uncle visited. He came by once every week or two. Always in the evening. Always stayed for dinner. Always left before midnight. And without fail, the basement sounds would be worse afterward. One night, I stayed awake on purpose. I waited until my mom was asleep. Then I crept downstairs and went to the back door. The basement entrance was only about 10 feet from the house. A set of concrete steps leading down to a thick metal door. I stood there listening. At first, nothing. Then a voice. Hoarse. Weak. "Hello." I nearly fell backward. It wasn't loud. It wasn't panicked. It sounded practiced, like someone who'd said that word many times without getting an answer. I ran back inside and locked my door. The next day, I confronted my uncle. He laughed. Actually laughed. "You've got imagination," he said. I told him I heard someone. His smile faded. "Stay out of it," he said. "This doesn't concern you." That night, the sounds were worse than ever. Screaming. Not constant. Short bursts. Cut off abruptly. I called the police. They came. Took a report. Checked the basement door. Locked. Padlocked. They knocked. No answer. My uncle showed up halfway through the visit, acting surprised and offended. He told them the basement was empty and had been for years. They left. The next morning, my uncle replaced the basement door. Thicker. Stronger. New lock. The neighbors watched the whole thing. No one said a word. A week later, I skipped school. I waited until my mom left for work. Then I went outside. I didn't go to the basement door. I went around the side of the house. Behind the bushes. That's where I found it. A second entrance. Hidden beneath a rotting wooden panel. Unlocked. The smell hit me first. Rot. Waste. Something sweet and metallic underneath. I almost threw up. I forced myself forward. The room below wasn't a basement. It was a pit. Concrete walls. Low ceiling. No windows. And people. 3 of them. Thin. Bruised. Eyes sunken. They looked at me like I was a ghost. One of them tried to stand and collapsed. Another started crying. I backed away and ran. I didn't go home. I went straight to the police station. This time, they came back with more cars. More people. They broke the door open. What they found made the news. The basement wasn't just beneath our house. It extended under several neighboring properties. A makeshift holding area. People were kept there. Hidden. Used. Some removed. Some weren't. The neighbors had known. All of them. They heard the sounds. They saw the deliveries. They watched people go missing. And they stayed quiet. My uncle was arrested. So were 2 neighbors. More arrests followed. We moved out immediately. Years have passed since then. I don't live anywhere with a basement now. But sometimes, when I'm walking through my apartment complex at night, I catch people watching me. And I remember the worst part of all this wasn't what was under the house. It was knowing how many people lived above it and chose not to care.